came here expecting paradise. Far Cry.
Far Cry Instincts isn't the game that you think it is, and if you're like me, you've probably never played it. That was until a visit to my local retro store. If yours is like mine, they probably have a little section set up at the counter where you can thumb through some loose discs, and that's where I found Far Cry Instincts, a game that would change Ubisoft forever just sitting in a cheap plastic sleeve for $8. There's an interesting development history behind Far Cry Instincts, and it starts with Ubisoft Montreal.
Nicolas just declared war on the US. The Georgians hit our communications, transportation, power grids. We still don't know how extensive the damage is. Your mission just became critical. You know what you...
Ubisoft was cooking in the early 2000s. Not only were they a publishing powerhouse for developers looking to get some funding behind their projects, they also had their own in-house studios like Ubisoft Montreal developing revolutionary titles like Splinter Cell. This was a stealth title that could kind of dynamically change depending on how good you were at sticking to the shadows that you helped create. Splinter Cell was actually the first mature Xbox game that I got my hands on as a kid because it was a present to my dad, and naturally I'd find myself playing it. Unlike Splinter Cell, however, there were a lot of mature games that I wouldn't find myself getting my hands on. I was, however, able to get my hands on an Xbox Magazine demo disc. These magazines and demo discs were a cool way to check out some of the games that you'd have no idea existed. You gotta remember, this came out at a time where internet was optional for 99% of people. The magazines would give you cool insider information, and the demo discs would give you a taste of those games that you couldn't legally purchase as a kid, like Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. But once I got tired of playing Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks 100 times, I could do a little window shopping with some of the discs that included game trailers.
Something dark and unspeakable left you deeply scarred.
One of the publishers providing these game trailers would of course be Ubisoft, but they weren't just here to show you the other developers' games. After their success with the Splinter Cell series, Ubisoft Montreal was looking to take their talent with the stealth game genre into a new experience, and that new experience would be Far Cry Instincts. I was so intrigued by this. I don't know how many times I watched this trailer, but the premise was just so exotic. You're stranded on an island and you have to fight to survive? It looked intense, introducing a world with seemingly limitless possibilities and violence. There was probably a lot of violence in this game too. Yeah, there was no way I was going to be able to get my hands on this game, so my Far Cry experience would end at this trailer. As I moved on with my life, my ability to play this game would slowly drift away as the Xbox continued to collect dust on my shelf, and my memory of this game would eventually wither away. Until 20 years later, when I found this disc. So after 2 decades, we're gonna see what Far Cry was like on the original Xbox. Better late than never, right?
Now Jack Carver's running for his life. Outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in the wild.
If you're like me, you may have just assumed that Far Cry Instincts was a neutered down version of the original PC game, but once you start looking into the development of Far Cry Instincts, it turns out that's not the case at all. To understand what's going on here, we gotta take a look at why Far Cry itself even exists. Developed exclusively for the PC in 2004 by Crytek, Far Cry was the first game to use the Cry engine, an in-house game engine pushing a level of fidelity unlike anything seen on the platform. Keyword: PC exclusive. There was no way Crytek was bringing this behemoth of a game to a game console, but Far Cry's publisher wasn't taking no for an answer. Yeah, Crytek had a publisher helping get copies of Far Cry out the door, and wouldn't you know it, that publisher just happened to have its own development team on speed dial ready to take on a new project. If you haven't guessed by now, that publisher was Ubisoft and that developer was Montreal. Ubisoft Montreal would be given the task of bringing Far Cry to the Xbox, but given the scope of the game, this would obviously be a hell of an undertaking. Montreal got this game out the door in about a year. Yeah, that would never happen in game development today. And you might be thinking to yourself, well yeah, but the game was basically done, so it couldn't take that long to just port the game to the console, right? And that would be a good guess, until you actually boot the game up. Special announcement.
Like and subscribe for more tracks.
Instincts shares the same engine as its bigger brother, as well as the basic story premise, but that's where the similarities end. Far Cry Instincts has completely different levels, cutscenes, and it even takes the story in a different direction, leading to some different gameplay elements that you'll only experience in Far Cry Instincts.
I can do sneaky.
But we'll get into those a little bit later. When Montreal was given the impossible task of bringing this game to a console, they knew that it would probably be a better idea to basically make their own game out of it. But they wouldn't just stop at making a unique single-player experience. Instincts would also include its own suite of multiplayer modes via Xbox Live, and split screen, and System Link, if you were somebody doing that in 2004. They also included mapping tools to create your own multiplayer maps, predating things like Halo 3's Forge mode by 2 years, or Mod Nation Racers by 5 years. Jesus Christ, dude, what a hell of a generational jump within 5 years, right? I thought Far Cry 5's arcade mode was a unique and novel feature. Little did I know the groundwork was already laid out for it almost a decade prior. While we're talking about how old this game is, there's two things about Instincts that surprised me right off the bat. Of course, the first thing that's pretty surprising was the graphical fidelity. This game was released on Xbox 360, by the way, but I like to play it in 480p. It just hits different.
Now, there's no problem here. I have a fishing permit. Motherfucker!
You're introduced to the game by doing a sick front flip off of a burning boat into an ocean of crystal clear water. Yeah, you think Call of Duty's cutscenes were wild? Or do you think they got their inspiration from? Instinct's campaign doesn't waste any time getting you to the gameplay. Your setup is that you're a man on a boat named
Jack Carver,
and while giving a lovely lady a ride around this picturesque island, the bad guys decide that they don't want you to have a boat. There's also some weird zombie stuff happening on the island, but we don't gotta worry about that right now. As soon as you're out of the water, you're sneaking through a jungle of lush foliage gently swaying in the wind, and what do we have here? Real-time shadows? Bloom? Ragdoll physics? Far Cry Instincts wastes no time shaking its assets at you every chance that it gets. Whether it's the realistic shadows cascading over your pistol as you sneak through the jungle, or the physics of the objects being hurled at you while you're making your escape on a stolen vehicle, you know that you're playing something new. Instincts takes its time introducing you to all of the mechanics. Sneaking plays a big part in most of the game, with enemies having multiple levels of detection for you to stay aware of. If you're in the green, you might as well be a ghost. If you're in the red, you might as well be playing Call of Duty Ghost.
Behind that cover!
Enemies will call out your position and which way you're moving if you get spotted, as well as set off alarms and yell out for backup. So sometimes it's worth rolling onto your back to take out that enemy in the cabana before you try to rush up to that sniper tower. And honestly, I think that Instincts is at its best when you're taking your time sneaking around. The environment is so immersive from this first-person perspective that it makes you want to take it slow and just soak it all in.
Many believe that the dinosaurs were wiped out by an asteroid impact. Others are not so sure.
There's so many great details in this game that you'll notice when you're taking it a little bit slower. Whether it's the patrols having a conversation with each other,
This end towards enemy.
or vehicles whizzing past you while you're crunching through the underbrush, you can definitely see that Ubisoft Montreal is flexing their Splinter Cell experience here. The biggest change in Instincts over its older brother is that instead of being in an open world island, the levels are more contained linear sections to lead you through the story. That being said, a lot of the maps are fairly spacious, giving you multiple points of entry and options to try out different playstyles. If I had had this game when I was a kid, I would have spent so much time messing around in it. But given that this is a first-person shooter, you want the combat to be good in those times that you're not doing your best Solid Snake impression, and Instincts delivers. Yeah, this is still a game from the generation where developers didn't know that aiming down your sights or sprinting could be a mechanic, but this is still a Far Cry game. Using weapons feels snappy and responsive in an era where shooters, even in the next generation, felt sloppy and clunky by comparison. When you're getting immersed, you might be thinking a little bit more realistically, and this game gives you that feedback. Headshots are satisfying, and they'll give you that drop you expect, and time to kill is quick for most enemies, especially when they don't see you coming. There's a nice variety of weapons that Instincts does a good job of mixing up throughout the campaign. Shotguns give you that satisfying punch that you expect, and snipers feel as discreet as the backstabs they don't see coming. I'm also a big fan of pulling the trigger and getting that crispy vibration feedback after every bullet, something that you probably wouldn't get on the PC version at the time. If you have any knowledge of gamepads on the PC from the early 2000s, drop them in the comments. In Instincts, you can even dual wield the pistols and SMGs, which feels like the coolest yet most pointless feature in the game. In most instances, you'll get pretty much the same time to kill but with half the ammo. But what would a shooter from the early 2000s be if it didn't let you dual wield something? What was a pointless addition for me personally was the traps and claymores you could set in the game.
Can you read what it says on the front of this mine?
Descend towards enemies.
It's a cool idea, but in most instances I felt like it was just a waste of time when I could dome them with a silencer, especially when you get the claymores in the later half of the game, despite it being where you see the least amount of stealth. But I'll say your mileage may vary depending on your playstyle. I am pretty good at underutilizing stuff in games.
Like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe.
We also can't forget about the weapon that's been a staple of the Far Cry series forever, the rock. Just pretend this is a rock. Yes, the rock is here, and this is where it all started. If you want to lure an unsuspecting enemy into a trap or just get them out of your way, the unlimited rock throw is here to suit your needs. Even if those needs end up being you forgetting that you just don't have the grenade toggled.
Watch out! This one is dangerous! Got it.
Now, while shooting up the bad guys on the Far Cry Extreme Island is fun and all, you should probably know that the travel brochure was leaving out a few details. Most notably, that the island is being used for human testing like Plum if it wasn't for animals. The original Far Cry touches on this subject, but Instincts lets you go full sicko mode and turn you into the experiment.
It's taken a long time and many failures. Able to improve on these folk practices. You'll feel a little prick.
This is the Instincts part of Far Cry Instincts. As you progress through the campaign, your animal-like feral powers become stronger and less controllable, leading to special abilities that are non-existent in the original game. Over time, you'll be able to insta-kill enemies with your bare hands, run and jump at super speeds, and highlight enemy trails, as well as see in the dark. Which is good, because some of the levels in this game are dark as shit.
Man, it sure is dark in here.
We're in an elevator in a building in the middle of the night. Of course it's dark.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like really dark.
These feral abilities are icing on the cake to what's already a unique experience from the original game, and they help add gameplay variety to mix things up in the later half. These feral abilities also get used in a special human versus predator type beat in the multiplayer game modes, which I would show you if I could, but unfortunately the Insignia player count for this game is currently 0. But as you're getting these new abilities, you'll have to use them to fight off new enemies. It turns out you weren't the only experiment on this island, and someone thought it was a good idea to let all the dogs out before they could get transported. Speaking of the game changing in the later half, there's some times where Instincts genuinely feels like a horror game. There's the zombies that have the mental capacity to control a gun somehow, but then you start getting the run towards you and explode zombies that make this terrifying sound every time they come at you. And if that doesn't catch you off guard, they also throw a tank in here for good measure. When I say tank, I literally mean this guy plays like a tank off of Left 4 Dead. He'll chase you around, try to ground pound you, and if he can't reach you, he'll just start slinging heavy shit at your forehead. I would actually be shocked if Valve wasn't taking inspiration from this guy for Left 4 Dead. But if the tank doesn't remind you of Valve games, maybe the levels where you're strafe jumping the entire time will look a little familiar. Hey, what's going on, guys? I was just here playing the greatest video game of all time. Be sure to like and subscribe. Yeah, there's these levels where you're strafe jumping the entire time, but what's a great single player without a little padding? For about the first half of the game, I was completely in love with Instincts. The pacing of everything was just fantastic. They sucked me in with the graphics and kept me around with the gameplay.
Did you see something?
And then they punished me for choosing to complete the game. Yeah, you can tell after some specific point in the game that the team was either running short on time or they were being told that they needed to extend this playtime. Like I said, the pacing in this game felt fantastic up until the point that you get into this mineshaft level that might as well be a sewer level.
No way for me to guide you. This blows.
It's cool at first, it's something new, it's where you're introduced to your see in the dark ability, but at some point, my god, does it overstay its welcome. You're running through these dark, boring hallways and rooms just hoping that the end of this section will take you back to the outside. As a consequence to most of this level being so dark, I got stuck in one area for like 20 minutes because the level designers decided to put a spotlight on a turret that that you use for like 10 seconds, instead of onto a hallway that's right next to it that's so dark it's almost impossible to see unless you blow out the contrast in the brightness settings. Outside of some bad instances and some levels where they'll just waste your time, there's some sections where you'll fight off waves of enemies to progress. When this happens, the enemies will just kind of spawn out of thin air regardless of where you're standing, which is pretty jarring in a game where you're used to sneaking around.
This has to be unlocked from the main ops room. I think I can squeeze into the window above the door.
Get on with it.
Yeah, no way I could fit through that window. I guess I'll just wait here. Going from taking out enemies in an organized fashion to progress through the level to fighting in these arenas where the enemies just spawn on top of you with no cover could, I'd say, get a little frustrating. The one saving grace to some of the unfairness in the sections is that the gunplay is still pretty good, so it feels a little like Doom in some instances. So I'll give it that. In my opinion, Far Cry Instincts is at its best when it's doing what it advertises. Sneaking through the jungle, paragliding through the mountains, or going Ben 10 beast mode. Oh, why did I write that? Instincts is at its worst when it's obviously wasting your time with sections that you have to replay or spend unnecessary amounts of time completing. Remember the tank I was just talking about? It was pretty cool when you encountered him for the first time. Not so much the second time, or the third time, or the time where you're fighting two at once but you can just cheese both of them by sitting in the room full of ammo. With each time you're doing this, having you locked in the room so you can't progress until you take out this bullet sponge that's wasting all of your time and ammo. But forget about the tank. Why stop at ruining the most unique enemy you have when you could just do the Enter the Matrix technique and litter the map full of bullet sponge soldiers that you either have to avoid or take out so you can activate map triggers to power up an elevator while also being significantly less generous with the safe checkpoints. So if you fail, which you're inevitably going to do, and have to restart from a checkpoint, you can spend even more time having to repeat a section that's not fun. But if you're going to conveniently leave out a few checkpoints, make sure you do it on something like an escort mission with a character that'll blindly walk into enemy gunfire before you have a chance to take them out. For everything that I like about Far Cry Instincts, there's equally something that has me wanting to activate my own feral abilities on my TV.
Oh, shit!
Just to continue to run this point home, the pacing in the beginning of this game is phenomenal. Despite this game not being the same open world experience as its predecessor, the levels are open enough to give you that gameplay freedom to experiment. I used to spend so much time in Splinter Cell just messing around, seeing what I could get away with in the game, and Far Cry Instincts feels like it was made for this type of gameplay. On the flip side, there's times where all you want to do is run away from the enemies attacking you so you can try to finish the section as quick as possible. There's levels that are intentionally designed to waste your time, and there's level design choices that'll have you running into dead ends or wishing that there was just a little more to explore. And there's other little nitpicks that are more so just kind of products of its time. The AI can be a little dumb, and sometimes it's hard to tell if you're hidden or not. Sometimes they just straight up won't shoot you, and sometimes they'll have pinpoint accuracy across the map. But I wouldn't say that was too big of an issue. What is a bigger issue is the loading times. Holy shit. My god, this game has some of the longest loading times I've ever experienced between levels. And why do you have to watch this game trailer every time the game starts up with no option to skip it? And why do you offer all of this multiplayer content and map customization, but no bots to play your created maps with? Perfect Dark figured this out like a decade ago. That just seems like a missed opportunity, especially now when you can't really play this game online without a lot of planning with friends beforehand. Ubisoft Montreal did a great job of making a unique experience out of what could have otherwise been considered an inferior version, and clearly it worked out pretty well for them. Ubisoft would release a sequel to Instincts called Predator and later acquire the rights to Far Cry entirely, sealing Far Cry's permanent future within the hands of Ubisoft for decades. Without Far Cry Instincts, there may have never been a Far Cry 3 as we know it today. Could you imagine a world where we didn't learn the definition of insanity, ride elephants, or fight a cult? In a way, maybe Instincts was the real Far Cry all along. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend giving Far Cry Instincts a shot, and if you have more friends with original Xboxes than me, you could get this working online through Insignia. If you want to know more about that, you can go check out my Insignia video on the OG Xbox. Don't even need to mod it. Thank you to all of the channel members that graciously support this channel despite how lazy I am with it. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like it if you liked it, and maybe let me know what I should cover next. It's been Joshua, we out. That Ubi was hard, and it was swinging. I really hope that joke landed.
This one is dangerous. Got it. I'm the best you've got, so you better...
I felt really weird saying that. And honestly, I think that Instincts is at its best when you're just taking your time.
I'll have nothing to bargain with! I'm dead!
I know.